Welcome to a brand new lesson. This is Hub Beyond Numbers, where we learn maths the easy way. In this lesson, we are looking at factorization of quadratic trinomials. We'll look at what quadratic trinomials are. Then I'll talk to you about how we factorize them. And then we look at two cases. The first is when the coefficient of x squared is 1. And secondly, when the coefficient of x squared is not 1. Without much I say or do, kindly take your notepad and then your pen so that we learn together. Let's start with knowing what a quadratic trinomial is. So we say an expression is a quadratic trinomial. What we simply mean is it is of the form ax squared plus bx and then plus c. And you should take note that the a should not be equal to 0. Also, the a, b, and then c should all be elements of the real numbers. Any expression that is of this form, so there's a variable x that is squared and it has a coefficient of a. Then there is an x with a coefficient of b and then a constant over here. Your a should not be 0. So let's look at some examples of quadratic trinomials so you get to understand it better. 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. So if you have to compare it to the general form of a quadratic trinomial, which we have over here, then that is ax squared plus bx plus c. What that means is our a is the 2, our b is the 7, and then the c is the 3. I hope you see that. We can take another example as 3x squared plus 11x plus 6. And if you have to compare it, your a becomes your 3, your b becomes your 11, and your c becomes your 6. You should take note that in as much as we have said a should not be equal to 0, a can be 1 as well, because 1 is not 0. So another example of a quadratic trinomial is x squared plus 5x plus 6. And with this, our a is 1. So normally when it's 1, we don't write that. Our b is 5 and our c is also 6. You should also take note that a, b, and c are not always positive numbers. They can be negative as well. If we have negative 5x squared plus 4x minus 7, you see, so your a here becomes your negative 5, your b is your positive 4, then your c is the negative 7. Now that we know what quadratic trinomials are, let's look at how we can factorize them. Now, when it comes to factorization of quadratic trinomial, first of all, we said our quadratic trinomial is of the form ax squared plus bx then plus c. Normally, there are books that say there are two cases. And the two cases are when a is equal to 1. So for case 1, you say when a is equal to 1, then your quadratic trinomial is then going to be x squared plus bx then plus c. But then for case 2, that is if a is not equal to 1, greater than 1, or a or a negative number, in that case, you're actually going to get an a x squared plus bx plus c. So we'll take our time and then look at the first case, that is when a is equal to 1. Our first case, which implies the coefficient of x squared is 1. You have x squared plus bx, then plus c. You always want to factorize so that you have two brackets. That is, two brackets containing binomials such that they multiply each other to give you this you have here. We can only do that if we have even number of terms here, specifically if we have 4 terms. So what this method does is you would want to expand this, or you rewrite the coefficient of b so that it becomes 2 terms. And with that, you are going to get 4 terms in total. This first one, which is for the x squared, and then 2 more terms for this, and then the last term. How do we do that? So you'd take C and then find factor pairs of C. You find the factor pairs of C. Now, these factor pairs you want should be such that if you add them together, so let's say if you take factor pairs of C to be M and then N, they should be such that this M, when added to N, should give you B. What I mean is, if you find the factor pairs of C, if you add them together, they should give you B. With these factor pairs, you now rewrite B as a sum of the 2 numbers, and then you can now factorize. It wouldn't be clear just with a theory. So let's take some examples, and then we see what I'm actually talking about. So for this first question we have here, it says x squared plus 5x, then plus 6. Now the first step is to find factor pairs of C. Take note, in this we have here, A is equal to 1, B is equal to 5, and the C is equal to 6, as you can see. So we find the factor pairs of 6. Talking of factor pairs of 6, we have 1 times 6. That gives us what? 6, right? So factor pairs, you don't just list out the factors, but then you write the numbers that multiply each other to give you the 6. Is there any other factor pairs? There is 2. And 2 multiplies 3 to give me 6. You see? So you can go on with the listing. But whilst you are listing, put in mind what you want to achieve. So at the end of the day, you want the set of factor pairs that when you add them together, you will get your B, the value of your B. Take note, your value, the B is 5. So with these least factor pairs we have, let's try and then see if we add them, would we get 5? For this first one, we have 1 plus 6. 1, we have, for this very first one, we have 1 and 6. If we add 1 to 6, what do we get? We actually get a 7. But that is not what we have here. So let's go to the next one. We have 2 and 3. If we add 2 and 3, what do we get? We get a 5. It simply means that the factor pairs of 6 that satisfy to add up to give us 5 will be 2 and then 3. So instead of what we have here, which is x squared plus 5x plus 6, we are going to write x squared plus, so instead of 5x, you write the 5 as the sum of these two. So 2x plus 3x. This is a rewriting of the 5, then plus 6. So with this, you can now start your factorization. And looking at the previous examples we did, this would then apply factorization by method of grouping. The instruction is simple. If the coefficient of x squared is 1, go and then take the C, look for its factor pairs that give you the B. If you get that, you now look for a way to rewrite the B as a sum of the factor pairs you now have. With that, you are going to get 4 terms, and then you continue with your factorization. So if we want to continue, we have x squared plus 2x. The common term, x squared, that is if we are grouping them. If we are grouping, we would have x squared plus 2x in one group, then plus 3x plus 6. So x squared and then 2x, what do they have in common? We've done all of this, and I'll just go straight to the point. So x squared and then 2x have x in common. Then with that, we have x plus 2. You see, so x times x gives us x squared. Then x times 2 gives us the 2x. Then plus 3x and then 6. What is their highest common factor? That is the 3. So 3 times what gives us 3x, that is x. And 3 times what gives us the 6, that is a positive 2. So we can easily conclude that since this bracket is the same as this bracket, we write that out first. So that we have x plus 2. Then the coefficients that are left would also be in one bracket. That is an x plus 3. And this here becomes our final answer. I'm sure if we take more examples, you would get the whole picture and then appreciate it. So let's take some few more examples. So this is another example here which says x squared minus 7x plus 10. And we have to factorize it. So our x squared minus 7x plus 10. And you take note that the coefficient of x squared is 1. So this is the case 1. And we said all we do is you take the c. So if you take the c, then you try as much as possible to write out factor pairs of, in this case, 10. That when we add will give us negative 7. Some of the factors that might come into your head is what? 2 and then 5. Yes, 2 times 5 gives us 10. But 2 plus 5, does it give us a negative 7? No. So you can't use 2 and then 5. You try and then think and then say, which other factors? Well, we have 10 and then 1. If we multiply 10 by 1, we would surely get 10. But if we add 10 and then 1, we don't get negative 7. This should tell you that we don't limit ourselves only to the positive integers when we want the factors. With that in mind, we can also say negative 2 times negative 5. Negative 2 times negative 5 actually gives us a 10. You'd agree with me. It gives us a 10. But if we add, do we get a negative 7? Yes. So negative 2 plus negative 5 gives us a negative 7. So with that, there's no need even going further. Hence, we are going to choose this over here, which is the negative 5 and the negative 2. So we come back here, then instead of x squared minus 7x plus 10, we rewrite it as x squared. Then the minus 7 now is being interchanged with negative 2 and then negative 5. So negative 2x, then minus 5x, and then plus 10. So you take note that negative 2 minus 5, that is negative 2x minus 5x, gives us a negative 7. We can now factorize using the method of grouping. So using the method of grouping, we have x squared minus 2x in one bracket plus negative 5x plus 10 also in another bracket. What does these two have in common? They have x in common. Hence, we factorize out our x. Then x times what gives us x squared, or x squared divided by x gives us our x. Then negative 2x divided by x will also give us a negative 2. Then we have negative 5 and then 10. What is the common factor of negative 5 and 10? That is a negative 5. So negative 5, then negative 5 times what gives us a negative 5x, that is an x. Negative 5 times what gives us the positive 10, that would be a negative 2. With that, you realize that you have these two brackets being what? Similar. Hence, we write them out, which is x minus 2. And then we pick out the coefficient here, bring it out here, x. Then this is positive and negative. We know when there's positive and negative, the negative always prevails. So minus 5. And that will be your simplification or your factorization. This is how we factorize quadratic trinomials. I would like to go to the next case, which is case 2, when the coefficient of x squared is any other number other than 1. But then it will make this video very long. Hence, I would solve one last example of this, and then we look at that in our next lesson. So this is going to be our last example, which is x squared minus x, then minus x, and we have to factorize. So x squared minus x minus x. How do you factorize this? So once again, you realize that the coefficient of the x squared is 1. And take note, the b here is also 1. So with our c being negative 6, we look for factor pairs of negative 6, which when added would give us a negative 1. You see, it is not just a 1, but then a negative 1. What are these factor pairs? You have negative 2 times 3. Negative 2 times 3 gives us a negative 6. But if we add them, do we get a negative 1? So negative 2 plus 3. Negative 2 plus 3 is not equal to what? Negative 1. So we'd have to look for another factor pairs. Let's try 2 and then negative 3. So negative 3 times 2 is equal to negative 6. That is correct. But if we add them, do we get a negative 1? Yes, we do. Hence, we can settle for this as our factor pairs that would do the work for us. So instead of x squared minus x minus 6, I'm going to rewrite it as x squared. Then there is 2 here, which is a positive. So plus 2x. And then my negative 3, so minus 3x. And then comes the minus 6. After which we can now do our groupings. And then we factorize. So what does x squared and then 2x have in common? They both have the x. We put our x here. Then x times what gives us x squared? Or in other words, x squared divided by x gives us an x. Then x times what gives us a 2x, or 2x divided by x. That gives us a positive 2. And we come to this side, we know there's a negative and then a negative here. So we factorize that out. Then what number do they have in common, or what is their highest common factor? That is the 3. And 3 times what gives us 3x, or negative 3 times what gives us negative 3x. That is an x. Then negative 3 times what gives us a negative 6. That is also a positive 2. So with that, with this and then this bracket being the same, we have x plus 2 in one bracket, and then the coefficient of the bracket here being our x, and then with this being our negative 3. Now this becomes our final answer. So this is how we factorize quadratic trinomials, that is with a being 1. So as usual, I'll leave you with some exercises so you try and then test your understanding with these. There are 5, and then they are all having the coefficient of x squared being 1. So try it out and let me know at the comment section if there's any issue of concern. This is how beyond numbers where we learn maths the easy way. In our subsequent lesson, we'll look at how to factorize when a is not 1. If you found this video helpful and you've not subscribed and you so do wish, you can choose to subscribe so that anytime I release a video, you'll be notified as well. Bye for now, then stay safe.